Captain Lee Timon was drinking his morning coffee when the universe decided to make his life complicated. The black liquid was still hot in his cup when the communication system on his ship started screaming with urgent alerts. Red lights flashed across the bridge of the TDF horizon as his crew scrambled to their stations. "Captain, we have an incoming transmission," said Lieutenant Park Ji-ho from the communications desk. His voice carried that special tone that meant trouble was coming. "It's from the Galactic High Council." Taman set down his coffee cup and straightened his uniform. In his 3 years of service with the Terran Defense Corps, he had never received a direct message from the Council. Most humans went their entire lives without even hearing from the massive alien government that supposedly ruled this part of the galaxy. "Put it through," he said. The main screen flickered to life, showing the official seal of the Galactic High Council. The image was followed by a voice that spoke in perfect, emotionless English through the translation system. "Captain Lee Taman of the Terran Defense Corps, you are hereby summoned to appear before the Galactic High Council at Station Kepler 7 within 72 standard hours. You will answer charges of crimes against divine order and violation of cosmic law." The transmission ended as suddenly as it had begun. The bridge fell silent, except for the gentle hum of the ship's engines. Taman stared at the blank screen, trying to process what he had just heard. "Crimes against divine order?" asked Ji-ho. What does that even mean?" Taman knew exactly what it meant. 3 months ago, during what the crew had simply called the incident, he had killed something that other species considered a god. At the time, it had seemed like the most natural thing in the world. A hostile entity had threatened Earth, so he had eliminated it. Simple. The entity had called itself Vashti, the Eternal. It had appeared near Earth's solar system as a massive energy being crackling with power that made the sun look dim by comparison. The creature had demanded that humanity surrender their homeworld as punishment for what it called cosmic insolence. When Earth refused, Vashti had begun moving toward the sun, intending to consume it and leave Earth a frozen wasteland. Tay-Min had been commanding a small patrol fleet at the time, while other ships maintained a safe distance. He had taken a single fighter craft and flown directly toward the entity. The thing had been enormous, stretching across space like a living aurora. But it had still been just another target to neutralize. He had used a standard plasma blade to sever the energy connections that kept the being anchored to their dimensional plane. Vashti had screamed as it dissolved back into whatever realm it had come from, but the Earth's sun had remained untouched. Mission accomplished. The paperwork afterward had been simple. Hostile entity neutralized. Threat to Earth eliminated. No human casualties. Another successful day for the Terran Defense Corps. But apparently, the rest of the galaxy saw things differently. "Set course for Station Kepler 7, Taman ordered. "Send a message to Earth Command. Tell them we're going to need a lawyer." Journey to the neutral station took 36 hours. During the trip, Taman's communications officer intercepted dozens of alien transmissions. Word of the summons had spread quickly through the galactic network. And the response was unlike anything the crew had ever seen. Some species were calling for his immediate execution. Others spoke of him with a mixture of fear and awe, using terms that the translation system could barely handle. God-killer was the most common phrase, but there were others. Divine Slayer, Breaker of Chains, the one who denies. "Captain," said Chief Engineer Kim Borum during one of their briefings, "I've been monitoring the alien news networks. 17 different species are calling this the crime of the century. They're saying that what you did was impossible." Taman frowned. "Impossible? I did it 3 months ago. How can something be impossible after it already happened?" "That's what I don't understand," Bjorn replied. "They keep talking about Vashti like it was some kind of immortal being. They say it had existed for thousands of years and was worshipped by billions of aliens across multiple star systems. And now it's dead, Taman said simply, so clearly. It wasn't immortal. When they reached Station Kepler 7, the sight that greeted them was overwhelming. The massive neutral station was surrounded by hundreds of alien vessels. Ships from dozens of different species floated in organized formations. Their crews, no doubt, eager to witness the trial of the human who had killed a god. Taman's ship was escorted to a docking bay by 6 armed vessels. As soon as the airlock opened, he was met by a group of nervous-looking security officers from various species. They wore the blue uniforms of station security, but their hands stayed close to their weapons. "Captain Lee, Taman," said their leader, a tall alien with gray skin and 4 arms. "I am Security Chief Veltar. You are under arrest by order of the Galactic High Council." Thelians clearly expected resistance, but Taman simply nodded and held out his hands for restraints. "I understand. Lead the way." As they walked through the station's corridors, Taman noticed how other beings reacted to his presence. Crowds of aliens lined the walkways, all staring at him with expressions he couldn't read. Some seemed afraid. Others appeared curious. A few looked angry enough to attack him if not for the security escort. "Is it true?" whispered a small, furry alien to its companion as they passed. "Did he really kill Vashti the Eternal? They say he just walked up to it and cut it down like it was nothing." The other replied, "Like it was just another enemy." The holding cells were located deep within the station, far from the main population areas. As they descended through multiple levels, Tommy got a better sense of just how seriously the aliens were taking this situation. Every corridor had additional guards. Every intersection had weapon scanners. The entire station seemed to be on high alert. When they finally reached the detention level, Taman was surprised to find that he would not be alone. The cells were filled with other prisoners, though most of them pressed themselves against the far walls when he approached. "The God Killer," one of them whispered. "They put the God Killer in here with us." Taman was placed in a cell by himself, which was probably for the best. The other prisoners seemed terrified of him, though. He couldn't understand why. It never harmed any innocent beings. He had only defended his homeworld from a threat as he sat on the simple cot in his cell. Taman reflected on the strange situation. Somewhere in the galaxy, there were species that had worshipped Vashti for centuries. They had built temples in its honor, offered prayers to its power, and believed it to be immortal and untouchable. But they had been wrong. Vashti had been just another hostile entity, and when it threatened Earth, it had been eliminated. The fact that others had considered it a god was irrelevant to the tactical situation. Tomorrow, he would face the council and answer for his actions. He would tell them the truth about what had happened and why he had done what he did. If they wanted to punish him for protecting his homeworld, then so be it. But deep down, Taman knew that he had done the right thing. And if another godlike entity threatened Earth tomorrow, he would do the same thing again without hesitation. The universe might see him as a criminal, but Earth would always see him as a protector. And that was all that mattered. The trial chamber was the largest room Captain Lee Taman had ever seen. The ceiling stretched so high that it disappeared into darkness, and the walls curved outward in a perfect circle that could have held a small city. Thousands of seats filled the space, each one occupied by a different alien species. Some had multiple eyes, others had no eyes at all. Some breathed air, others floated in tanks of liquid. All of them were staring at him. T-Men walked into the center of the chamber, wearing his standard Terran Defense Corps uniform. He had been offered fancy clothes for the trial, but he preferred to appear as what he was, a soldier who had done his duty. His footsteps echoed in the vast space as he approached the defendant's table. At the table sat Dr. Park So-young, Earth's chief xenobiologist and the closest thing humanity had to to a galactic law expert. She had arrived on the station just hours before the trial began, carrying several thick books and a determined expression. "Captain," she said quietly as he sat down beside her, "have been studying their legal system all night. This is going to be difficult." "Why?" Taman asked. "I defended Earth from a hostile entity. That should be legal under any reasonable law." Dr. Park shook her head. "That's the problem. Okay? They don't see Vashti as a hostile entity. Okay? They see it as a god. And according to galactic law, gods are supposed to be immortal and untouchable." Above them, the council members took their seats on a raised platform that circled the chamber. There were representatives from hundreds of different species, each one chosen to speak for their people in matters of galactic importance. At the center sat Hierarch Kothara, a being made of living crystal whose faceted body reflected the chamber's lights like a prism. "This session of the Galactic High Council will now begin," Kothara announced. "Abi." His voice rang through the chamber without any need for amplification. "We are here to judge the human Taman for the crime of deicide, the killing of a divine being." A murmur ran through the crowd. Many of the aliens had never heard the word deicide before because the crime had never been committed. Gods were not supposed to die. "The prosecution will now present their case," Kothara continued. The prosecutor was a tall, thin alien with purple skin and eyes that glowed like stars. He rose from his seat and began to speak in a voice full of anger and religious fervor. "Honored council members," he began, "we gather today to witness justice for the most terrible crime in galactic history. The defendant has murdered Vashti the Eternal, a being who has watched over our galaxy for over 2,000 years." The prosecutor walked to the center of the chamber, his movements dramatic and rehearsed. Vashti was not merely alive. He was eternal. He was divine. He was worshipped by 17 different species across 43 star systems. Billions of beings prayed to him, built temples in his honor, and looked to him for guidance and protection. On the chamber's main screen, images began to appear. Massive temples carved into the sides of mountains, entire planets covered in shrines, crowds of aliens kneeling in prayer before statues of the energy being that Taman had killed. 2 millennia, Vashti maintained the balance of power in the Andromeda Spiral. The prosecutor continued. He settled disputes between species. He prevented wars. He guided the spiritual development of countless civilizations. Taman watched the images with growing confusion. The being he had fought had shown up near Earth, making threats and demanding surrender. It had not seemed interested in peace or spiritual guidance. And then the prosecutor's voice rose to a shout. This human appeared and destroyed everything. With no authority, no right, no understanding of what he was doing, he murdered a god. The crowd erupted in angry voices. Some aliens stood and shook their fists at Taman. Others made gestures that were probably curses in their languages. Dr. Park placed a warning hand on his arm as he started to stand. "Let them finish," she whispered. "Then we'll have our turn." The prosecutor called his first witness, High Priest Zenakara of the Warthan Empire. The alien was ancient, his scales dulled with age, and his movements slow and careful. But when he spoke about Vashti, his voice was strong and full of passion. "I have served Vashti for over 300 years, the priest said. My father served him and his father before him. For generations, my people have looked to the Eternal One for wisdom and protection." The priest's testimony went on for nearly an hour. He spoke of miracles that Vashti had performed, of prayers that had been answered, of the comfort that billions of beings had found in their worship. He described elaborate ceremonies and festivals held in the god's honor and the deep spiritual connection that existed between Vashti and his followers. "And now he is gone," the priest concluded, his voice breaking with emotion. "The light that guided us for 2,000 years has been extinguished by this human's blade. More witnesses followed. Scientists from the Kelver Collective testified about the energy readings they had detected when Vashti died, measurements that showed the destruction of something that should have been eternal. A historian from the Thraxian Republic spoke of the role that Vashti had played in shaping galactic civilization. A philosopher from the Zephyrian Union explained the concept of divine immunity and why gods were supposed to be beyond the reach of mortal weapons. Each witness added to the same picture. Vashti had been special, unique, immortal. His death was not just murder, but a violation of the natural order of the universe. Dr. Park took notes throughout the testimony, but Taman could see the worry in her eyes. The case against him was building like a mountain of evidence, and all of it pointed to the same conclusion. He had done something that was supposed to be impossible. The prosecution calls his final witness. The prosecutor announced, "Security, Chief Veltar of Station Kepler 7, the gray-skinned alien who had arrested Taman, took the witness stand." His testimony was brief but damaging. He described how calm Taman had been during his arrest, how he had shown no remorse or even understanding of the magnitude of his crime. The defendant acted as if killing a god was routine, Veltar said. When I told him he was under arrest for deicide, he simply nodded and asked to be led to his cell. There was no shock, no denial, no recognition that he had done something extraordinary. The prosecutor turned to face the council. "Members of the High Council, the evidence is clear. The defendant has committed the ultimate crime. He has killed a being that was worshipped by billions, that had existed for millennia, that was supposed to be immortal and untouchable." He pointed directly at Taman. "This human has violated the most fundamental law of the universe, that gods are beyond the reach of mortal weapons. He has shattered the faith of 17 species and destroyed something that can never be replaced." The prosecutor's voice rose to a final crescendo. "The defendant must be found guilty of deicide and sentenced to the maximum penalty allowed by galactic law. Only then can we begin to repair the damage he has done to the spiritual fabric of our galaxy." The chamber fell silent as the prosecutor returned to his seat. Thousands of alien eyes turned to look at Taman, waiting to see how he would respond to the overwhelming case against him. Hierarch Kolthar's crystal form glowed brighter as he addressed the defense table. "Dr. Park Soyoung, you may now present your case." Dr. Park stood slowly, gathering her notes and books. She looked small and fragile compared to the massive alien prosecutor, but her voice was steady as she began to speak. "Honored council members," she said, "my client acted in defense of his homeworld. Everything else is irrelevant." The crowd began to murmur again, but this time the sound was different. It was confusion rather than anger, uncertainty rather than outrage. The aliens had expected a complex legal defense, not a simple statement. "A fact," Dr. Park continued. "The prosecution wants you to focus on what Vashti meant to other species. But the only question that matters is this: did he threaten Earth? And the answer is yes." She walked to the center of the chamber, her small form dwarfed by the enormous space around her. "Everything else is just opinion." Dr. Park So-young stood in the center of the vast chamber, surrounded by thousands of aliens who had never encountered a human defense before. Her small frame looked fragile compared to the massive prosecutor who had just finished his case, but her voice carried clearly through the enormous space. "Members of the council," she began, "I want to tell you about humanity. Because until you understand my species, you cannot understand why my client did what he did." She activated a holographic display that showed images of Earth. The blue and green planet rotated slowly above the chamber floor, looking peaceful and unremarkable compared to the exotic worlds that many council members called home. "This is Earth," Dr. Park said. It may look ordinary to you, but it produced something that apparently does not exist anywhere else in the galaxy. Species that does not believe in untouchable gods. A ripple of confusion passed through the crowd. Several council members leaned forward in their seats, trying to understand what she meant. Throughout human history, we have always challenged authority, Dr. Park continued. When kings claimed divine right to rule, we overthrew them. When priests claimed to speak for gods, we questioned them. When anyone claimed to be beyond challenge, we proved them wrong. The holographic display changed to show scenes from Earth's history. Human revolutions, the overthrow of tyrants, the constant struggle against oppression. The images were violent and chaotic, unlike anything most of the peaceful alien species had ever seen. You see chaos? Dr. Park said, noting the shocked expressions. On many faces, we see progress. Every human generation has torn down the structures that the previous generation built, always searching for something better. She walked closer to the council platform, her eyes meeting those of Hierarch Colthera. Your species worship beings that claim to be eternal and unchanging. Humans worship the idea that nothing should be eternal and unchanging. The prosecutor stood up, his purple skin darkening with anger. This is irrelevant philosophy. The defendant committed murder. No, Dr. Park replied firmly. He committed defense. There is a difference. She turned back to the crowd and activated a new section of the holographic display. This time, it showed the encounter between Timon and Vashti, recorded by sensors on nearby ships. This is what actually happened 3 months ago, she said. Watch carefully. The display showed Vashti approaching Earth's solar system, a massive energy being that stretched across space like a living storm. The creature was beautiful in its own way, crackling with power and radiating colors that had no names in any human language. Vashti did not come to Earth as a teacher or guide, Dr. Park explained as the recording played. He came as a conqueror. He demanded that humanity surrendered their homeworld as punishment for what he called cosmic insolence. The recording showed Vashti's massive form beginning to move toward Earth's sun. Energy tendrils reached out from the creature's body, probing the star's surface and preparing to drain its power. When Earth refused to surrender, Vashti decided to destroy our sun. Dr. Park continued. 8 billion human lives would have died in the cold darkness that followed. My client prevented that genocide. She paused the recording at the moment when Taemin's small fighter craft appeared on screen. The human ship looked like a tiny insect next to the massive godentity, but it moved with purpose and determination. Captain Lee Taemin did not set out to kill a god, Dr. Park said. He set out to protect his home. The fact that his enemy happened to be worshipped by other species was irrelevant to the tactical situation. The recording continued, showing Taemin's ship approaching Vashti directly. There was no hesitation, no ceremony, no recognition of the creature's supposed divinity. Captain simply identified a threat and moved to neutralize it. This is how humans think, Dr. Park explained. We do not ask whether our enemies are gods or mortals. We ask whether they threaten our people. If the answer is yes, we act. To Deathblade showed the moment when Taemin used his plasma blade to sever Vashti's dimensional connections. The great energy being screamed as it was torn apart, its voice echoing across space before fading into silence. The prosecution has told you that this was impossible, Dr. Park said. But as you can see, it was not impossible. It was simply something that no one had ever tried before. She deactivated the holographic display and faced the council directly. The difference between humans and every other species in this galaxy is simple. You believe in things that cannot be challenged. We believe that everything can be challenged. Dr. Park called her first witness, Commander Kim Woo-jin, Tame, superior officer, who appeared via hologram from Earth Defense Command, the middle-aged officer wore his uniform with quiet pride, and spoke in the same calm, practical tone that seemed to characterize all human military personnel. "Commander Kim," Dr. Park began, "can you tell the Council how Earth Defense Command classified the entity known as Vashtai? Hostile alien entity, classification level 7. Kim replied without hesitation. K posed a direct threat to Earth's population and infrastructure. Standard protocols required immediate neutralization. Did the fact that other species worshipped this entity affect your orders? Kim looked genuinely puzzled by the question. No, why would it? The religious beliefs of other species are not relevant to Earth's defense. Our only concern was protecting human lives. The prosecutor objected. This shows a complete disregard for galactic law and divine authority. We follow human law, Kim replied simply. And human law says that anyone who threatens Earth is an enemy, regardless of what they claim to be. Dr. Park's next witness was Professor Lee Sung-ho, a historian from Seoul University who specialized in human religious development. The elderly academic appeared nervous as he testified before the massive alien council, but his voice grew stronger as he spoke about his area of expertise. Throughout human history, we have always had gods, Professor Lee explained. But we have also always had god-killers. Our mythology is full of heroes who challenged divine authority and won. He gestured to invisible images as he spoke. Prometheus stole fire from the gods. David slew Goliath. Thor fought the world serpent. These are not cautionary tales in human culture. They are inspirational stories. The professor's testimony continued for nearly an hour, describing how humans had consistently created and destroyed their own gods throughout history. Unlike other species who seem to worship the same entities for thousands of years, humans changed their religious beliefs as often as they changed their governments. The idea of an unchallengeable God is foreign to human thinking, Professor Lee concluded. We believe that if something can be killed, it was never truly divine in the first place. The final witness was Captain Taman himself. Dr. Park had debated whether to put him on the stand, knowing that his straightforward manner might offend the alien council. But she decided that the truth was their best defense. Captain, she began, when you encountered Vashtai, did you know that other species considered him a god? Taman nodded. Yes, it was mentioned in the intelligence briefing. Did that knowledge affect your decision to engage? No, Taman replied. A threat is a threat. It doesn't matter what other people call it. The prosecutor stood up, his voice full of outrage. You killed the being that was worshipped by billions, and you felt nothing. Taman looked at him with calm eyes, felt relief that Earth was safe. Nothing else mattered. But surely, you must understand that gods are supposed to be immortal, the prosecutor pressed. They are beyond the reach of mortal weapons. It could be killed. It wasn't a god, Taman said simply. It was just another enemy. The chamber erupted in shocked voices. The casual way that Taman dismissed the concept of divine immunity was more disturbing to many aliens than the actual killing had been. Dr. Park returned to the center of the chamber for her closing argument. Members of the council, my client stands accused of deicide. I submit that this crime is impossible. Key, you cannot kill something that was never truly alive in the way you believed. She gestured toward Taman. This human did not kill a god. He killed a powerful alien entity that had convinced other species to worship it. There is a difference. Her voice grew stronger as she continued. The prosecution wants you to believe that some beings are beyond challenge, beyond question, beyond the reach of mortal weapons. But my client has proven that this is false. Nothing is beyond challenge. Nothing is beyond question, and nothing is truly immortal. Dr. Park's final words rang through the chamber. Captain Lee Taman acted to protect 8 billion human lives. If your gods threaten innocent people, then perhaps you have been worshiping the wrong entities. And perhaps it is time for you to learn what humans have always known, that the only authority worth respecting is the authority you choose to give. The chamber fell silent as she returned to her seat. The defense had made their case, but the real verdict would depend on whether the alien council could accept the terrifying possibility that their most fundamental beliefs about the nature of divinity might be wrong. The trial chamber remained silent for long minutes after Dr. Park finished her closing argument. Thousands of alien beings sat in stunned quiet, trying to process what they had just heard. The idea that gods could be challenged, that divine authority was not absolute, went against everything most species had believed for thousands of years. Hierarch. Cole Thara's crystal form flickered with nervous energy as he consulted with the other council members. Whispered conversations in dozens of languages filled the upper levels of the chamber, but the words were too quiet for the translation systems to pick up clearly. Finally, Kothara called for order. His voice echoed through the vast space, bringing silence back to the proceedings. "The council will now deliberate," he announced. "We will reconvene in 4 hours to deliver our verdict." As the aliens began to file out of the chamber, Taman noticed something strange happening. Groups of beings were clustering together, speaking in urgent, hushed tones. Many kept glancing back at him with expressions he had never seen before. It was not just fear or anger anymore. It was something deeper and more troubling. "Doctor," Taman said quietly to Dr. Park, "what are they so worried about?" Dr. Park gathered her papers and books, her face thoughtful. "I think they're beginning to understand what humanity really represents, and it's scaring them." They were escorted back to the detention level by the same nervous guards who had brought them to the trial. But this time, the corridors were different. Word of the day's testimony had spread throughout the station, and everywhere they went, aliens stopped what they were doing to stare at the human who had killed a god in the holding area. The other prisoners had been moved to different cells, leaving Taman alone in his section. Dr. Park was allowed to stay with him to prepare for the verdict, though neither of them expected there would be much to prepare for. "We did our best," Dr. Park said as they sat in the small cell. "But I don't know if it was enough. The evidence against you is overwhelming by their standards." "What's the worst they can do?" Taman asked. "Execution, probably. Or life imprisonment on a penal colony. The punishment for deicide has never been decided because no one thought the crime was possible." They waited in silence for a while, listening to the distant sounds of the station around them. But after an hour, those sounds began to change. Instead of the usual calm hum of normal activity, there was an undercurrent of urgency, of panic, something going very wrong. Dr. Park's personal communicator chimed with an incoming message from Earth. She read it quickly, then looked up at Taman with wide eyes. "What is it?" he asked. "Something is happening out there," she said. "According to this message, 17 different god entities have contacted Earth in the past 6 hours. They're all trying to negotiate peace treaties." Taman frowned. "Peace treaties? For what?" "They're afraid," Dr. Park said, her voice filled with amazement. "The gods are afraid of humanity." Before Taman could respond, the cell door opened, and Security Chief Veltar entered, followed by several other aliens. Their faces showed the same mixture of fear and confusion that seemed to be spreading throughout the station. "The Hierarch requests your immediate presence in his private chambers," Veltar said. "Both of you." They were escorted through different corridors this time, away from the public areas and into the administrative section of the station. The aliens they passed seemed even more agitated than before, speaking in rapid, frightened voices and constantly checking their communication devices. Hierarch Kothara's private chamber was much smaller than the trial room, but no less impressive. The walls were covered with displays showing news feeds from across the galaxy, and most of them seemed to be reporting the same story. Sid Kothera said, without ceremony. His crystal form was flickering more rapidly now, a sign of extreme agitation. We need to discuss what your trial has done to the galaxy. Dr. Park and Taman took seats across from the hierarch, waiting for him to explain. In the past 4 hours, Kothara began. We have received reports of unprecedented activity among the god entities throughout known space. Beings that have ruled the same territories for millennia are suddenly abandoning their domains. Ancient powers that have never shown fear of anything are fleeing from sectors where humans might travel. He gestured to the news displays, which showed images of massive energy beings disappearing into hyperspace, of temples being abandoned by their divine occupants, of entire species losing contact with the gods they had worshipped for generations. The mere possibility that humans might not recognize divine authority has shaken the cosmic order. Kothara continued. Gods that have existed since before most species achieved spaceflight are suddenly questioning their own immortality. Dr. Park leaned forward in her chair. They're afraid because someone finally proved they could be killed. It's more than that, Kothara replied. They're afraid because your species doesn't recognize the concept of divine immunity. To you, a god is just another enemy that can be destroyed if it threatens your people. He turned to face Taman directly. Do you understand what you have done? You have not just killed one god. You have destroyed the idea that gods cannot be killed. Taman thought about this for a moment. Good, he said simply. Kothara's crystal form flared brighter. Good. You have thrown the galaxy into chaos. I protected Earth, Taman replied. If that caused problems for other people's gods, then those gods probably deserved to have problems. The hierarch stared at him for a long moment, then turned to Dr. Park. Is he always like this? Yes, she said. Humans don't really do reverence for authority figures. We're more practical than that. Kothara walked to one of the displays and pulled up a star map showing the current locations of known god entities. Huge sections of the galaxy that had been marked in gold to show divine territories were now empty, the gods having fled to regions far from any human presence. This is what your practicality has accomplished, he said. Beings that have maintained galactic stability for thousands of years are abandoning their responsibilities because they fear a species that emerged from a single world. Maybe they weren't maintaining stability, Dr. Park suggested. Maybe they were just maintaining their own power. Before Kothara could respond, his communication system activated with an urgent message. The voice that came through the speakers was strained and frightened. Hierarch, we have a situation. 3 more god entities have just sent formal surrender documents to Earth Defense Command. They're offering tribute in exchange for protection from human forces. Kothara's form flickered so rapidly that it became almost transparent. Surrender? Okay? Gods are surrendering to mortals. Another message came through. Sir, the Celestial Court of Andromeda is requesting an emergency session to discuss new protocols for dealing with humans. They want to establish formal diplomatic relations. And sir, a third voice added, we're receiving reports that several species are beginning to question their own religious beliefs. If gods can be killed, their priests are asking, were they ever really gods at all? The hierarch turned off the communication system and slumped in his chair. For the first time since the trial began, he looked defeated. Do you see what you have done? He asked Timon. You have not just committed deicide. You have committed deicide on the very concept of divinity itself. Keyman stood up, his uniform crisp and his bearing confident. Hierarch Kothara, may I ask you a question? Go ahead. By what authority did Vastai claim the right to destroy Earth? Kothara paused, clearly not expecting the question. Ki was a god. Gods have authority over mortal species. Says who? Taman asked. The question hung in the air like a challenge. Kothara opened his mouth to answer, then closed it again. For the first time in his long life, he couldn't think of a response. That's the difference between humans and everyone else, Taman continued. You accept authority because someone claims to have it. We only accept authority that we choose to give. He walked to the window that showed the view of space outside the station. In the distance, Earth hung like a blue jewel among the stars, looking peaceful and unremarkable. You want to know what gave me the right to kill your god? Cayman asked quietly. Kothara nodded, his crystal form focused intently on the human Te-men, pointed toward the distant Earth, his gesture simple and without ceremony. That world produced a species that doesn't believe in gods, he said. That's what gave me the right. The silence in Hierarch Kothara's private chamber stretched for long minutes after Captain Lee Taman pointed toward Earth, the crystal being stared at the distant blue world, trying to understand how something so small and ordinary could have produced a species that terrified gods. I need to return to the council, Kothara finally said. His voice sounded tired, aged by the weight of revelation. We have a verdict to deliver. As they walked back through the station corridors, Dr. Park So-young noticed that the chaos had spread even further. Aliens were clustered around communication terminals, listening to reports from across the galaxy. The news was the same everywhere. The age of unquestioned divine authority was ending. Dr. Park called a voice from behind them. They turned to see Ambassador Choi Hai-jin, Earth's senior diplomat, hurrying to catch up. She had arrived on the station just hours before, her face showing the strain of emergency travel. Ambassador, Dr. Park said with relief. What's the situation back home? Complicated, Choi replied. Earth Defense Command is receiving surrender offers from entities we didn't even know existed. The diplomatic corps is working around the clock to establish protocols for dealing with former gods who want to negotiate. She fell into step beside them as they continued toward the trial chamber. But there's something else. 3 human colonies in the outer systems reported visits from god entities in the past day. None of them made threats. They all came asking for permission to exist in human space. Timon looked surprised. Permission? Apparently, word has spread that humans kill gods who threaten them, Choi explained. So the smart ones are trying to get protection by asking nicely first. They reached the trial chamber to find it even more crowded than before. Representatives from dozens of additional species had arrived to witness the verdict, and the atmosphere was electric with tension. In fear, Hierarch Kothara took his place at the center of the council platform. His crystal form was dimmer now, as if the events of the day had drained some essential energy from him. The other council members looked equally shaken, their various alien features showing universal expressions of uncertainty. This session of the Galactic High Council will now resume, Kothara announced. We have reached our verdict in the case of the human Lee Taman. Chamber fell completely silent. Thousands of beings leaned forward in their seats, waiting to hear the judgment that would define humanity's place in the galaxy. The council has deliberated for 4 hours, Kothara continued. We have considered the evidence, the testimony, and the unprecedented circumstances of this case. He paused, his crystal form flickering as if he was struggling with the words. We find that the defendant acted according to the laws and customs of his species. The charges of crimes against divine order are dismissed. The chamber erupted in shocked voices. Some aliens cheered, others protested, and many simply sat in stunned silence. The prosecutor jumped to his feet, his purple skin darkening with rage. This is impossible, he shouted. The defendant killed a god. How can that not be a crime? Kothara's form flared brighter as he called for order. 'Cause, he said slowly, we have been forced to confront a terrible truth. The human species does not recognize divine authority. To them, Vashti was not a god. He was simply another threat to be eliminated. The hierarch gestured toward Taman, who stood calmly at the defendant's table. This human did not commit deicide because, in his understanding, there was no deity. To kill, there was only an enemy of earth. But our laws, the prosecutor protested, our traditions, our beliefs, Kothara replied quietly, have been proven wrong. He turned to address the full council. For thousands of years, we have lived under the assumption that certain beings were beyond challenge, beyond question, beyond the reach of mortal weapons. The humans have shown us that this assumption was false. The chamber began to fill with worried murmurs as the implications became clear. If gods could be killed, if divine authority was not absolute, then everything the galaxy had believed about the cosmic order was in question. Court recognizes, Kothara continued, that the defendant was protecting his homeworld from a hostile entity. The fact that other species worship this entity does not change the nature of his actions. Dr. Park squeezed Taman's arm in relief, but he remained focused on the hierarch's words. However, Kothara said, his voice growing stronger, this verdict comes with a warning. The human species has demonstrated abilities that threaten the stability of galactic civilization. They must be watched carefully. Before anyone could respond to this warning, Kothara's communication system activated with another urgent message. The voice that came through was breathless with excitement and fear. Hierarch, urgent report from the Frontier Command. Captain, Yang Minho of the Earth Defense Corps has just eliminated another godentity in the Vega system. The being was threatening a human mining colony. The chamber fell silent again as the news sank in. Another god was dead. Another immortal being had been proven mortal. Sir, the voice continued, we're receiving similar reports from across human space. It appears that the Earth Defense Corps has classified all god entities as potential threats and is responding accordingly. Taman felt a moment of pride for his fellow officers. They were doing their duty, protecting human interests just as he had done. Kothara closed the communication channel and looked directly at Ambassador Choi. How many of these god killers does your species have? Choi's response was calm and matter of fact. Every human is a potential god killer. Hierarch, we simply don't recognize the concept of divine immunity. The truth of her words hit the alien council like a physical blow. It wasn't just Taman who was dangerous. It was his entire species. 8 billion humans who'd treat gods the same way they treated any other enemy. This changes everything, whispered one of the council members. Yes, Kothara agreed. It does. He stood and addressed the chamber one final time. The defendant is free to go. This trial is concluded. As the aliens began to file out of the chamber, Taman noticed something different in their behavior. The fear was still there, but it was mixed with something else now. Respect. The kind of respect that came from recognizing a superior predator. Ambassador Choi approached the defendant's table with a serious expression. Captain, I have new orders for you from Earth Defense Command. Yes, ma'am. 3 more god entities have made demands of human colonies in the past 6 hours. Your orders are to respond as you see fit. Taman nodded. Understood. Protect human interests by any means necessary. Exactly. As they left the chamber, Dr. Park looked back at the alien council members who were still huddled in worried conversation. Do you think they'll cause trouble for us? Ambassador Choi shook her head. No, they're too afraid. Word is already spreading. Through diplomatic channels, that humanity is not to be threatened under any circumstances. They walked through the station corridors, past groups of aliens who stepped aside to let them pass. The same beings who had called for Taman's execution just hours before now treated him with nervous deference. What happens now? Dr. Park asked. Now, Taman said simply, we go home and get back to work. Their ship departed. Station Kepler 7. The view screen showed Earth growing larger in the distance. The blue world that had spawned the God-killers looked peaceful and unchanged. But across the galaxy, nothing would ever be the same. The age of unquestioned divine authority was over. The age of humanity had begun. In the months that followed, reports would come in from across known space. Good entities abandoning their territories, species questioning their religious beliefs, ancient powers that had ruled for millennia suddenly finding themselves mortal and afraid. And at the center of it all, a single blue world where 8 billion humans continued their daily lives, unaware that they had become the most feared species in the galaxy simply by being themselves. The council had demanded to know what gave the human the right to kill a god. The answer was simple. Earth had produced a species that didn't believe gods had the right to exist unchallenged. And that made all the difference.